generation watercolors. They sent me this set to try out in exchange for an honest review, and I got this last year and I've used it a couple of times since then. This set is supposed to be their highest quality artist grade paints. These are marketed to be light fast, and also most of the colors are single pigment, so this is very promising. Sort of has all of the qualities you would expect from an artist grade paint set. So the set they sent me specifically is their 36 color set, and it comes in these 5 ml tubes, and the box that they came in is nice and it seems to protect the tubes really well. The first thing I want to talk about is the color options, and since I have the 36 color set, there's a lot for me to choose from and talk about. When it comes to watercolors, I've always felt that larger sets are a little bit excessive, but for this is actually a good variety of colors in between. It's a good selection, where usually bigger sets would have a lot of colors that are very similar to each other. This one I think has more of a variety in the colors that they did choose. Even in the yellows, I think there's only two where I would say they are maybe too similar, and the rest are very different from each other. There's one yellow that I just really love how intense it is. It almost looks like gold. I also love the variety they have in their reds. I think that every single one of the reds in this set is beautiful. I think the reds and the purples specifically reminds me a lot of my Mijello set, which I always associate with this reddish purples to that brand. So I'm really impressed by those reds. I also like their blues, when usually I'm not that much of a blue lover, and with most bigger sets, I would always think that they would have maybe too many blues. I think the selection of blues in this set is perfect because they just have enough to have a good variety, again, in the color options that they chose to put in this set. I think the one thing that I would have added to this set was maybe a couple more greens. I would have loved to have more greens and maybe more earth tones in the set, but I can't really decide which ones I would take out to replace those. So I think overall it's a really great color selection. And now we're going to paint a portrait with it. And before anything else, I wanted to thank Callie for letting me paint her photo. Callie from Instagram, her Instagram will be linked in the description. I think this photo is so amazing, and it's going to showcase a lot of what I really love about this watercolor set. And I'm so thankful for Callie for letting us paint this photo for this video. So what I did notice in this initial layer was that these colors are very, very clean. They're very transparent. And in that way, this reminds me a lot of my Sennelier watercolors, which is the watercolors that I would always go for if I was looking for a cleaner, sort of more blended out look with watercolors, and especially when I am painting portraits. So what this first layer is really going to show us is not exactly the intensity of the colors, but it's more about how they would look when they're watered down, to see if we can still get a lot of pigment out of them. And I think that I was able to do that. And after that first layer, I did get to use my masking fluid, because there's going to be a big jump in between this first laydown of color versus the very dark and intense second and third layers in this painting. So I thought the masking fluid would help a lot with getting the shapes of the flowers right. And once it did dry, I was able to see really the best thing about these watercolors, and that is the intensity of these colors. And I was just so blown away by how pigmented these watercolors are. They remind me so much of my Mijello watercolors. And when it comes to the intensity of the colors, I would always say that Mijello are my favorite for that. Because it's Paul Rubens and Mijellos, when I'm using the dark colors, especially the reds and the purples, it almost feels like I am painting with ink when I use them. That's how intense they are. And another thing that I love is how these colors all worked together in this painting. And in the second layer is where I could really see that they are just as good being watered down as they are when used in their most intense. So I think that they're really versatile in that way. Another thing that I love about these paints, outside of how intensely pigmented they are, is how they work well together and how they mix. And I really wanted to test that out in the second and third layers, where I wanted to see how these colors would mix with each other on the paper. Because at this point, I'm not really painting individual elements in the painting yet. I'm still just painting around the negative shape of the flowers. So I got to play around with the colors in this layer, and I really love how they look together and how they mix with each other. And I think it's a testament to using single pigment colors, because my Micello watercolors also have this property to them. Even when I'm using warm and cool colors together, they would just end up looking more intense and dark instead of looking grayed out and dark. It's hard to explain, but I just really think that when these colors are mixed together is when they really shine, and I think they look gorgeous together. And I just really like how they mix with each other on the paper. I think I'm such a fan of this look. One thing about these that really stands out, because when you start using artist grade paints, there's not going to be a lot of differences between brands. If you're using professional quality watercolors in the same brands, you're going to start to feel like each other. But one thing about these paints that stands out to me, not really in when I paint with them, it's just that they feel almost tacky to the touch when they dry. They look glossy when they dry on the palette. Very similar to my Schminke watercolors, where they have this sheen when you pour them into their pans. But also similarly to the Schminke paints, they don't dry glossy when you paint with them. They would still look matte like most watercolor paintings, but I only have those two brands that have that similar feel to them in the pans, so I thought it would be a good thing to just point out. Overall, as a conclusion to this review, I wanted to say first that I've sort of shifted my outlook when it comes to buying watercolors, and I think just art supplies in general. I'm in this weird spot in doing art supplies review that it's really getting hard to distinguish between good art supplies, and especially in artist grade paints. When they're really good quality, they sort of start to blur together. And in this case, in the case of the Paul Rubens 4th generation watercolors, reminds me a lot of the Daniel Smith watercolors in its consistency throughout all of the colors in its set. So there are sets that I would associate with the color families, like Micellos. I would associate them with the reddish purples. And there are also brands where I like their warmer colors more. So this one, I think that I like all of their colors together. I think all of them are consistently good, and that's why it reminds me of the Daniel Smith set that I have. This also reminds me of the Micello Mission Gold watercolors, just in the intensity of these colors, especially the inky reds and purples, which I always talk about, but this has the same intensity in those colors. And then the last set that they remind me of actually is the Sennelier watercolors, because of its transparency and clean look when it's watered down. Overall, this just really feels like a lot of my other artist grade watercolors. And I want to go back to my perspective in buying art supplies in general, because I think that if you already have any of those other color sets that I have mentioned, I think you can skip buying this one. And it's not even because it's not good, but it's really just because it's gonna feel very similarly to your other sets. There's not gonna be anything very different from the other sets that you already have. But on the flip side, it's a very versatile paint set. And it's great if you're looking into getting your first artist grade paints. And even if you're just looking to expand your set, this is really good for that, because they're very transparent, they're very strong and intense. The color options, I think, are great, and they're also light fast. So it's just really everything you could ask for in a professional watercolor set. So if you're in the market for your first artist grade paints, or even if you're just looking to add to your collection, I would check this one out. I think it's a really good, solid watercolor set. So that would be it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I wanted to thank my patrons for supporting me. And also, if you want to see a tutorial for how I did this painting, just let me know in the comments and I will be sure to drop that. Thanks again to Kali for letting me paint her for this video, and that will be it for this one. Thank you guys for watching, and I will be seeing you guys again soon.